Now at 9 o'clock, the race hangs in the balance with the South Carolina Republican primaries here. Who will come out on top after all the infighting between candidates? And new concerns as Zika hits the Carolinas, what doctors here are doing to contain the spread of the virus.
This is WCNC, NBC Charlotte Morning News.
Good morning, everyone. We'll get to our top stories in just a minute, but first thing is first. Let's talk about the weather as you take a live look at uptown Charlotte through our view cam. You can certainly see the clouds are out and about, but I think you're going to like at least the mild temperatures we may be experiencing. Thank you so much for joining us here on NBC Charlotte. I'm Bora Kim alongside meteorologist John Wendell. And John, you promised that the weather is going to be mild today, so I guess you take the good and the bad, right?
Well, we're starting the day off in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees, so that's a nice start.
Yeah, I like
but we're
that.
only climbing up into the 60s, but the thing is the clouds are going to hang in. It'd be nice to have the sunshine that we had yesterday and the temperatures that we have today. 50 degrees right now, cloudy skies across the region, winds out of the southwest at a light 6 miles per hour. Here's a look at your satellite picture, and you can see a lot of clouds across North and South Carolina. There are a few very light rain showers that are down in the southwestern corner of the state, and we may see a sprinkle or two here or there. And we also may see a little bit of thinning of the clouds here and there as well. So it's not a total washout of the day. Take a look at the satellite picture here. This is the futurecast, 1 o'clock. There could be some showers in the mountains and also toward, say, the Shelby area, but by 5 o'clock, most of the activity is around us. Hour-by-hour forecast calls for temperatures to climb up into the 60s, probably low or mid-60s, and only the slightest chance for a shower. Another chance of rain first part of the work week. I'll tell you about that coming up more.
All right. Thank you, John. Today is the day, one of the biggest votes in the race for the White House, and there's been a lot of last-minute changes in the numbers.
Every time they do a poll, I have a lousy poll.
Republican Donald Trump losing steam with voters in South Carolina. Ted Cruz are closing the gap with just 5 points between them in the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll. The next 7 days, of course, are going to provide some clarity in the race as candidates from both sides of the aisle battle it out in South Carolina primaries and the Nevada caucuses. So who do we need to watch as Republicans head out to the polls today in the Palmetto State? Well, Trump is losing ground over rivals Cruz and Marco Rubio, but he is still coming out on top. The difference between Trump and Cruz is the same as it was before, right before Cruz beat out Trump in Iowa. Rubio polling a strong third, hoping to edge out John Kasich and Jeb Bush. In the last couple of days, South Carolina has been living up to its expectations with the attacks getting stronger and the word sharper between the candidates. The Palmetto State is notorious in the political world for stripping the layers of civility off campaigns, revealing the darker side of politics, and 2016 is no exception.
Ted Cruz, this is the biggest liar I've ever seen. Even Marco Rubio said he's a liar. And when a politician says another politician's a liar, I never heard that before.
It's easy to say, let's make America great again. But the question to ask is, do you understand what made America great in the first place?
You elect me president, I will never pit you against each other in order to win an election.
Now, experts say the fluctuation in the polls could have something to do with the recent controversy surrounding Trump, from his fight with the Pope to his comments about the Iraq War and George W. Bush. But the voters of South Carolina ultimately have the final say today. NBC Charlotte reporter Diana Rugg is out live in South Carolina this morning. And Diana, I understand that you already spoke to some of the voters out there.
The polls opened here about 2 hours ago. The economy is what they talked about more than anything. There was a line when the polls opened at 7 a.m. and a steady stream of people ever since. Now, this is an important primary in the presidential race. Voters told us they know how serious this is as they headed to their voting booths. The First in the South primary has predicted every party nominee since 1980, with the exception of 2012 when it picked Newt Gingrich. It's also considered a good predictor of the Southern Heavy Super Tuesday primaries on March 1st. Today, the lineup offers a pretty broad range of candidates, but voters standing in line before the polls open say they are happy with their choices.
I think the spectrum's pretty broad, but I think we've got a good quality field of Republican candidates.
And I'm a senior citizen, so I look forward to voting for the right person. I think we need total change, true change in our election. Besides voting for myself, I'm voting for my grandkids.
And there are 2 precincts voting in this one building, about 4,000 registered voters altogether. So far, about 140 people have come to vote. The clerk told me they expect about a 30% turnout for this primary. We're live in Fort Mill. Diana Rugg, NBC Charlotte.
All right. Thank you so much, Diana. Again, the polls close at 7 p.m. and we will have continuing coverage of today's first in the South primary all day long. We have teams across the state tonight stationed with different candidates, and we'll have live coverage during our 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock newscasts. And again, when we are not on the air, you can always find updates on our website at WCNC.com. South Carolina isn't the only state with voters heading to the polls today. Out in Nevada, Democratic voters will caucus tonight. The Democratic race is about as close as it could get right now, with Bernie Sanders polling even with Hillary Clinton. While the Democratic contest hasn't exactly been as fiery as the Republican one, it is starting to get heated ahead of tonight.
I'm not just promising free this and free that and free everything.
Sanders dialing up his criticism of Bill Clinton at the MSNBC Telemundo town hall, but Clinton is also firing back.
Bill Clinton did a pretty good job as president, but let's be clear. I happen to think that our trade agreements from NAFTA through TPP have been a disaster.
I just don't know where all this comes from, because maybe it's that Senator Sanders wasn't really a Democrat until he decided to run for president.
Today's vote in Nevada is huge for the Clinton campaign. A loss there to Sanders after squeaking by in Iowa, and a huge loss in New Hampshire would damage her argument that she is the more electable candidate. After today's vote, Republicans in Nevada will have their turn on Tuesday. Then 1 week from today, South Carolina Democrats will pick between Sanders and Clinton. In just a handful of hours, people will gather in Washington to say their final goodbyes to Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. His funeral is set to start at 11 o'clock this morning. Yesterday, people paid their respect to Scalia as he lay in repose in the Supreme Court's Great Hall. The president will not attend the funeral today, a move that's getting him a lot of criticism. The Supreme Court says that it is not getting involved in the North Carolina redistricting ruling. The decision came late last night to let a lower court ruling stand. The lower court demanded a change in 2 congressional districts, saying that they were unconstitutional because they were drawn on racial lines. The General Assembly had until late last night to approve the new congressional district maps, which they did. And as a result, the U.S. House primary election in March was rescheduled for June. Some experts say the outcome might have been different if Justice Scalia had still been alive. City leaders are expecting a huge crowd when they meet first thing next week to talk about a non-discrimination ordinance. Council will hear public comment on a plan that would let transgender people use the restroom of their choice. 144 people have signed up to speak at the meeting. We will be there and bring you complete coverage on Monday night. New concerns covering North Carolina after a confirmed case of the Zika virus in the state.
I was out to dinner with my family. We were eating outside. I hadn't put on any bug spray, and I noticed that my legs were torn up.
This may be just the beginning. There are 5 potential cases in our area so far, more than 40 statewide. We talked to one local man who caught the virus before it was on the watch list. Now, Adrian Kumas, his 2 brothers and mom were in Costa Rica last November. He says while on the island, his joints started to hurt, his eyes got red, and he started hallucinating. When he got back to Charlotte, Adrian's doctors tested him for chikungunya and dengue, but not Zika, because it wasn't on the doctor's radar.
We're learning something new every day. You know, there's a lot of unknowns, which always makes it a little unnerving for people.
Right now, the State Department of Health and Human Services is starting to ramp up their resources dedicated to the virus. Experts say the particular mosquito that carries Zika is not prevalent in our state, but people who travel to at-risk areas need to take proper precautions. And another health concern in the state, this time over mumps. Health officials say the number of cases is growing, with 11 possible cases of mumps across North Carolina. Confirmed cases involve employees who work at Lowe's corporate headquarters in Iredell County. Now people are scrambling to sanitize at the offices, hoping to stop the spread of the highly contagious virus.
It is spread by droplets, so that would include things like sharing cups, people sneezing or coughing right directly on each other.
Even before the 2 cases at Lowe's headquarters were confirmed, the company started sending out letters to its employees warning them of the virus and asking them to check if they're up to date on the vaccine. Health officials say people across the state should do the same. Coming up, it was a deadly plane crash involving a pilot with 40 years of experience in the air. An update on the crash in Union County. And crooks have stooped to new lows, how they are targeting firefighters and what's being done to stop them.